When you get 4 journos in a room, it can become unbelievably negative. So we might as well start off by saying Celtic 3, Leipzig 1. What a result.
What a performance. I mean, it was a sensational performance. Celtic have had, top-class results in Europe. I mean, beating Barcelona, beating AC Milan, beat Man United, Nakamura, etc., etc. But the performance last night was, particularly in the second half, was absolutely sensational in modern football. Finding space, passing, aggression. The pressing was unbelievable. Led to the second goal, just like they were swarming around that area. I think it's one of the. I mean, there's recency bias, isn't it? What you've seen this week is always better than what you saw a month ago, or a year ago, or 5 years ago. But I thought it was absolutely sensational.
I think, picking up on your point though, Hugh and Michael, this is something that I think gives it even greater credence, is the fact that in the previous games that he's mentioned there, when we're talking about great Celtic results, all of those results have come against top drawer opposition, but the way to go about doing it has been sit in, soak it up, maybe get your moment from a set piece or a slip up, and Tony Watt runs away after, Xavi has a swipe at it and misses it. This was a different Celtic performance. This is Celtic on the front foot, as well as taking a leaf out of what happened in Bergamo, which is, by the way, when you lose the ball, everybody get back.
Yeah, excuse me. I mean, Brendan Rodgers talked about it after the game. He said one of the things that pleased him most was that kind of balance of the he called it the vibrancy and the kind of excitement of the attacking against Bratislava and the tactical discipline and defending of the Atalanta game. Excuse me. And I think that's what you got, and it brought them this great performance, as Hugh says. I mean, I was impressed by how they recovered from losing the goal as well, because they did wobble a little bit at that period, and you thought, and you thought, because don't forget, Leipzig had lost their previous 3 games, which I thought made them more dangerous for Celtic, that they would see this as a game that they might get off the mark. But Celtic came back from that. They needed the goal that Khun delivered for them. It was a fabulous goal. I don't know if there's been any debate about whether it was a cross or not. I saw Joe Hart saying they thought it might be a cross.
I think that's ludicrous.
Nicolas Khun actually just said, and you can only take him at his word, he absolutely meant it. He looked up and he thought, this is my moment. This is.
There was nobody across the ball to.
Maeda was going in at the back.
It was well back.
To be fair, there's a glance before he hits it. He has a look.
But it's what he does. It's him doing his Arjen Robben impersonation. That's what he does. He did it against Aberdeen.
The way he hit it, just that lovely float. It seemed to be in the air a long time, and the keeper couldn't get it in off the post. And then after that, I thought Celtic really kind of surged into the game. They get the second goal. The second half was strong again. I mean, they had a bit of defending to do, which they did really strongly, really powerfully, defending crosses and so on. And then they made chances, and they were forcing it. As Hughes talks about the pressing, I think that was the kind of big quality that they showed all night, was that tireless kind of pressing and really giving Leipzig a hard time. And I think that the upshot of it all is that they're in this really handsome position in the group at the halfway stage. And it was really interesting, Peter, that they were asked, Rodgers was asked last night that, might you even aspire to top 8?
Yes.
Rather than getting into one of the playoff places. Now, to be fair to him, he kind of shot that down and said, listen, we're not getting ahead of ourselves. I was looking at it, and I think it might take about 20 points to get a top 8 place.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because obviously they're 13th at the moment in this 36-team table. They're level in points with Man City, and to get it in that last 16, you're thinking to yourself, well, how many points? According to Opta, it's 16 points. They reckon is a top 8 place. 10 would be good enough for playoff spot. Now, the reason I think it's dropped to 16 points is because you have the likes of Real Madrid. They've lost 2 games.
Man
and
City
they've lost one of them. They've lost one of them in their own backyard, which, for Real Madrid at times, Alisson, is unheard of.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think Celtic would be delighted if they get the 10 points. It would take you into the playoffs. They would be thrilled with that. I think if you'd offered it before the campaign, before a ball was kicked, they would have bitten your hand off for it. You have to remember where they've been in recent seasons, how sobering the Champions League and environment has been. But I think what you saw last night was a maturity in the performance that's come. I mean, that's the third successive Champions League win at home. I think you would be nudging yourself towards thinking, is this a team now that's capable of going back to where it was 20 odd years ago when they were really pretty formidable on their own patch, when they made Celtic Park a fortress. I think it's very tentative. I think it's very early before you start getting to that established position. However, I just thought it was an incredibly mature display. You've still seen signs. I mean, Dortmund must still be fresh in the memory for Celtic fans. There is still the risk of that in performances, but I think if they were to go and qualify, I think you would have to see it as an absolute success, given just how daunting it's been for them in the Champions League in recent seasons.
We are, and I think rightly so, always commenting on the here and now. When you witness something, if it's open to criticism, you criticise them. They were rightly criticised, in my view. I looked at the Dortmund and as Hugh mentioned on the previous journals, it was 7 going on 10. Yeah. Now, with any situation, and I think Brendan Rodgers was brought back for Europe, you know, his learning curve for me deserves the praise of it. I wouldn't get ahead, and I think you're right to point out that note of caution, but the learning curve for me is spanked 7-1. Going on 10 against Dortmund, who are not the greatest side Dortmund have ever had, as Hugh watches them on a regular basis. But the difference is, Michael, he received stinging criticism, and then what he does is he looks at it and says, right, okay, if we're going to play that way again against Atalanta in their backyard, we're in for another rough night. So he changes his tactics, regardless of his dig. I don't mind him digging at the press afterwards and talking about pragmatism, but he changed his tactics and they worked their socks off. And this time around, when I was going into it, I'm thinking to myself, well, wait a minute, great, you've got a great result against a really, really good Italian side. You're coming up against a German side in a league that is way stronger than ours. What are you going to do? Are you going to learn from Atalanta and still take a little bit of that and take it into this? But the reason, I still thought Leipzig were going to win, but the reason I think they deserve tremendous praise is the way they went about winning.
Yeah, and I think we're all guilty, and me as much as anybody, of just focusing so much on the manager and the manager's tactics. But I mean, they didn't play well in Dortmund. Individually, they didn't play well. I mean, that sounds obvious to say when a 7-1 defeat, but it wasn't just the manager's tactics. Individually they were losing battles all over the pitch. And I wasn't in at the Atalanta match, but clearly they were much better defensively, in terms of attitude and aggression and all that.
It was a bank of 4, 5, 1, and the one came back in to make it a difficult 11 to break down.
Yeah, and you saw it last night. The energy levels were off the scale last night, and you need that. You could talk all you like about shapes and inverted fullbacks and all the stuff that we all know about. But my God, you've got to have that intensity and work rate. If you're a team like Celtic in the Champions League, Man City might get away with dropping intensity a little bit because they're so good with the ball. But they had that last night, and when they've got that, formidable's maybe a bit strong, but they're certainly an extremely difficult team to play against, and they showed that against Leipzig, who they're having a bad Champions League, but they're having an excellent Bundesliga campaign. They're second.
And the Champions League campaign they've got, if you look at who's beaten them, Atletico Madrid and Liverpool, and that they've lost games where reasonably they could expect. I agree with Michael. I thought this was a really dangerous game for Celtic on so many levels, one of which was Leipzig had to win last night. They're not out of this competition, but there's 4 games left and they're not out of it by any manner of means, but they're struggling. It's going to be really difficult for them. So they had to win, I felt, last night, and that made it difficult for Celtic because they would be more aggressive. They wouldn't sit back and just say, we can take a point. And for chunks of the game, most pertinently after the Leipzig's opening goal, you saw what they were about, the big, It's a big team, physical team as well. I mean, you saw that from all the set pieces. See the amount of headers they won inside the box.
The corners were really the boy.
The corner was
able to put in vicious corners.
So technically, I've watched them in the Bundesliga. They're going to be a Champions League team in the Bundesliga. They're second at the moment. They're far better than Dortmund, although Dortmund beat them the other week, but Dortmund is a crazy mob at the moment. So they're going to do all right in the Bundesliga. They're a good mob.
The ultimate, praise for them often comes from the team that have played them. And I think Marco Rose was very complimentary about the way they went about their business. He wasn't surprised, even after, as you mentioned, the Dortmund. Christoph Baumgartner says they played some really good football. They pressed us back and made it difficult for us to get out from the back. When they scored the third, there was no way back for us. On the night, Celtic were better than us. It's as simple as that.
You know what's interesting about that, Peter, is that you've got visiting managers and visiting players praising Celtic's performance rather than the atmosphere. Because that's what you've had for years at Parkhead, and even to an extent at Ibrox. European teams come and go, what an atmosphere, what a noise, blah, blah, blah. Oh, we won 3-0.
Yes.
You know? So I think it's refreshing. And don't get me wrong, Rose did praise the atmosphere, and that's great, but that's kind of, you almost take it for granted you're going to get that. But far more significantly and far more satisfyingly for Celtic is to get visiting teams and managers say, by the way, you played really well.
Yeah, and not the patronising element, you've got a cracking atmosphere, but, you know...
Thanks very much.
And when you look at the stats, you pointed out that it's 3 Champions League matches at home where they've won. And I think that's all Celtic fans really want from their team. Yes, they want commitment, they want desire. If you get great football, my God, young kids go back home saying, I was there, at a Champions League night. But I just wonder if he's now got that situation where he can make Celtic Park a fortress again.
That'll certainly be the ambition. I think it'll take more than just 3 results. I think you've got to do it on a consistent basis over time. But certainly what you would see are the foundations are there, the performance last night, not just the result, but the manner of the performance would augur a belief in that you can go and do it. And really interesting, that was the first time Celtic have beat a team in the top, from one of the top 5 leagues for the first time in 12 years. It's also, I think, the first time they've beat German opposition in the Champions League, if I'm right. I think it's a really crucial, a huge result for them in terms of everything around it and what it meant. I think now it gives them a belief. I think coupled with the draw and the point that they took in Italy, I think they will start to regard themselves as a proper European team, as a Champions League team, which you've not seen in recent years. You've just not had any evidence. You've had sporadic results, but you've not been able to piece it together. 7 points so far after 4 games, I think, is a.
And if you look at the 4 games as well, you could see that out of the 4 games, 3 of the hardest fixtures in your schedule. You've negotiated. One of them's catastrophic. The other 2 you get 4 points from. And what you've got now is your hardest fixture out of the next little tranche is your last game, probably Villa away, which might not matter.
Villa have won all 3 games so far. So
if both are in a...
They may have qualified comfortably. By the time they play Celtic.
Just before we leave that subject, and I think, we talked about the manager and his learning curve. When you look at the players, mitigating circumstances, fans don't really care about mitigating circumstances. They just want wins. But Joe Hart said something significant, I think, in the commentary last night about Nicolas Khun was not well. He had an injury as well, and I think it was difficult for him to settle in because he'd setback after setback. When he comes in, he didn't look the real deal. But boy, they look as if they've got somebody. I mean, I think I heard someone on the BBC, he was talking about who they remind him of, and they said Jota, and I didn't see Jota. I see a kind of a Patrick Roberts, but a better Patrick Roberts.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at him now and thinking, is this the next guy that they sell for a massive profit? As you say, he came in, he had dental problems, didn't he?
Yeah. His wisdom tooth.
Yeah, and it just seemed to throw him, and he looked kind of light, didn't he? And you thought, is this... another of these kind of 10 a penny wingers that come in and show flashes of it.
January can be a tough time for any player coming mid-season.
You know what we're like in Scotland, we don't give players time, do we? We're on them and immediately making judgments, and sometimes that's correct and other times it's wrong. But I thought last night he wanted to get on the ball all the time. He wanted to carry it. He wanted to make things happen. He could have had a hat-trick. He could have blasted one over in the second half. But and you could feel a wee bit of electricity going around the stadium every time he was on the ball after that goal, because it was like, what's he going to do next? You know?
Yeah. The other good thing, and this is the positive way to finish on it, the manager deserves praise. The players definitely deserve all the praise that's coming their way. I'm looking at the way this whole league is constructed, Hugh. By the time you get to January, as you said, and you've got Villa, the window's open. And I just wonder at that point if he looks and says to himself, well, you know, the objective for me, for Brendan Rodgers, was make Celtic a better side in Europe. He's on his way to it. We'll judge them in the next couple of matches as well. But can he get a couple more just to really supplement it for a knockout game?
Well, I think he's all managers want more players. There's not a manager in the world that say, I'm quite happy with what we have. Pep Guardiola wouldn't be, Ancelotti certainly wouldn't be at this moment in time. Every manager will want to go again. What Celtic have got is money. They've got money, and they're getting more. It's washing it. I mean, people are forgetting how much money they made just out of that one victory last night, and another couple of million into the bank. So they'll have money. Rodgers then has got to think not only just about the knockout phase of the Champions League, he's got to think about next season, because the model at Celtic is to sell somebody in the summer. The three that are in the departure lounge for me at the moment are Khun, Johnston and Hatate. I think at the start of the season, Hatate would be the most likely to leave next summer, but it all depends on when. So he'll be looking at himself and saying, not only do I have to gang up for the rest of the season, but what happens if Khun leaves in the summer? James Forrest is not getting any younger. Yang, I thought, who did well when he came on, is a possibility for Maida will always be Maida. I need another winger. I think he'll buy a winger in the window.
And by the way, can I apologise to all Celtic fans who are saying, my God, they've sold half the team already in this programme.
That's the whole. That's the whole model. I mean, it's why people criticise all the time. Oh, Celtic's recruitment's awful. And you say it can't be awful. Just look at the bottom line every year. They make millions in player trading.
It's a selling point. It's part of the attraction of
bringing
players in. Come,
exactly.
we give you a platform. If you do well, you have an opportunity.
You go to anybody that wants to, any winger that you buy in January, you'll say, we bought a guy who couldn't get a game for RB Leipzig, had to leave them, blah, couldn't get a game here and there. We brought him, and we've now sold him to the English Premier League.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your balance on it, though, and again, I just offer a note of caution on it. They've got Bruges young boys. They've got a really good chance. Just as a footnote, Michael, I don't know about you, I think everybody is loving what UEFA have done with this new format.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because they are setting the precedent for this season. So that's why we're not sure whether it's 16 points might be enough to get you top thing. Somebody made an interesting point to me that it's difficult for scouts and the kind of data people, because normally you just have 3 opposition to research, and you're playing them twice. So your second game is more of a top-up.
Yeah.
Now they've got 8 to deal with, and listen, that's an aside, but I don't know. I'm not quite sure if I've made my mind up yet, Peter, but
what's worrying you about it?
I don't know. I like the home and away format, and I think there's probably going to be imbalances. I mean, you mentioned it, Hugh. The teams that Leipzig have played have been really difficult. I mean, Juventus, Madrid, and Liverpool. It's wow.
Yeah, but the reason why I think it works is I think fans were feeling, especially that second tier queue of fans who have witnessed great teams of the past that have won a Feyenoord's won a European Cup, and Ajax has won European Cups in the past, a Celtic, and suddenly these second tier teams, if they were drawn in a group of 4, if you're pot 3 and pot 4, you're getting battered.
Aye.
And there isn't really that ability to surprise people along the way, and you're also getting variety.
Yeah, I think that it appeals. I mean, the top clubs in the Champions League will just hate any format of the Champions League at all before it gets to the knockout. It's a chore for them. Yeah. They've got to play. You've got to play Bournemouth on Saturday, then get in a plane and go to, wherever, Salzburg on a Tuesday, and then come back and play Liverpool.
Will they feel?
There's also very little jeopardy for them, the big clubs.
Yeah.
They're not going to fail to qualify.
But will they feel miffed that they now have to play games where they have to step up? I mean, because I watched, of the two highlights that I've picked up on, I watched Man City, who could have been out of sight in the game against Sporting, and then Sporting in the second half just took chances and won the game. And I watched, Morata score for AC Milan, and they ended up winning 3-1. And you're thinking to yourself, a couple of skint taking a few scalps along the way is great viewing.
Yeah, but the ultimate result will not change. I mean, he's the top 8. You might get one. You might get a club that just like a Leicester did. Villa or something. Oh, goodness gracious, they've got in the top 8.
But see that middle section, Hugh. That middle section suddenly gets a check for an additional 10 million that they didn't have.
Well, I think that's the crucial point. What it's done is revitalise an area of the Champions League that was pretty moribund. You could see it with Celtic fans. Every year, Celtic fans going into the Champions League and said, do you know what, I would take third. See if you gave me third now, we'd take third in a game after Christmas and all that. It's revitalised that section because there's a lot of Celtics throughout Europe, like Benfica's, and I mean, we're not the Dutch teams. You're not alone, and it's revitalised that section. I thought, the atmosphere generally at Celtic Park is excellent, we know, but I thought yesterday or last night the level not of expectation but of sort of relish about playing in the game was because most punters round about me would say take a draw.
Yeah.
I thought last night there was a prevailing feeling of that, like a draw would be a good result given the fact that you've come into it off the back of Atalanta, you've taken a point. Then you've got Bruges and Young Boys. I think a lot of people were saying a point will be sufficient. Take a point. Good team. Leipzig needs something from this when you get a point, and then you look to the next two home games.
And after the Leipzig goal, 100% of people in the stadium would have taken a point. 100%.
Are you a fan of the format?
I think it's quite refreshing. I quite like it.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say, it takes away that drop down.
There's no parachute.
That you might have basically make your money from a Champions League campaign.
Yes.
And then, but as you said, maybe finish third, drop into the Europa League, and see how far you go.
Yeah, that gives you the odd chance of a final.
Yeah.
The difference I would say now for boards is they're looking and saying, wait a minute, you drop down and you might get a few extra million. You stay here for a playoff match, you've banked 60 million. You've banked 60 million.
And you've had 7 games.
Yeah, that's why the format has changed. It's to keep the Super League or a breakaway Super League at bay.
Yes.
So it's just this is the direction of travel that UEFA will do to try and appease the bigger clubs.
Yeah.
So it means more games, and Celtic would be a beneficiary if they get through.